Hi, welcome back to Commodores Kitchen. Since it's officially winter, it's time to make your favorite comfort foods. Today, Kendall and I are showing you 3 of our best recipes that'll keep you warm all season long. They're fun, they're fast, and they're delicious. Here's what's up first. Buttermilk pancakes with a warm blackberry syrup. Light and fluffy, these pancakes are full of familiar flavors and griddled to golden perfection. They get topped with a thick blackberry syrup that is sure to have you going back for seconds. Caprese Panini on focaccia bread. Freshly blended pesto gets spread on a hearty focaccia bread and topped with rotisserie chicken, tomato, and mozzarella cheese. This sandwich becomes your ultimate winter comfort food when it meets a hot panini press. Mini molten lava cakes. Semi and bittersweet chocolate with a hint of espresso create a decadent combination in this crowd-pleasing dessert. You'll surprise your friends even more when a velvety chocolate lava oozes out the center.
To kick off the morning, we're making one of our favorite breakfasts, buttermilk pancakes with a warm blackberry syrup.
And the syrup is great because you don't have to go to the store and buy it. It's basically like a warm blackberry jam.
I'm going to mix together our dry ingredients. We're starting with 1 cup of flour and 2 tablespoons of sugar.
And while Kendall does that, I'm going to make our wet ingredients. So I'm starting with 1 egg. And then I also have a cup of buttermilk. And buttermilk is what's going to make our pancakes really fluffy. And the nice thing about buttermilk is if you don't have it, that's okay. You can just add 1 tablespoon of vinegar per cup of milk. I'm just going to whisk this together.
And we're going to finish off our dry ingredients with 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
And after she gives that a quick mix, I'm just going to pour this right in there. And you always want to add your wet into your dry.
Oh, perfect.
Do it in batches.
We want to make sure that we aren't over stirring this and just combine it until it's all nice and even, because if you stir it too much, you'll have a tough batter and end up with rubbery pancakes.
Okay, that's looking really good. And our last ingredient that's really important is butter. And I'm just going to use this to help me out. And so I melted it and I let it cool just a little bit because, surprisingly, if you add too warm of butter, it could scramble your egg. And one last thing that we like to do, and we're kind of joking about it because it's something we do for cookies, is we add vanilla extract and just like a tiny dash into our pancakes. And I'll just add a nice other sweet element into it.
Vanilla is one of my all-time favorite ingredients. I add it to everything.
Yeah, that looks really good.
And now we're just going to cook these up on a griddle until they're perfectly golden brown. With a greased griddle or sauté pan on medium-high heat, add a 1/4 cup batter into a circle. Let the pancakes cook for 2 minutes without touching. Check underneath after 2 minutes, and if it begins to turn lightly brown, they are ready to flip. Let the pancakes cook for another 2 minutes and re-grease the pan before starting a new batch. We finished cooking our pancakes and plated them up.
It looks so good. And we also made this thick blackberry syrup. Here's how we made it. In a small saucepan on a medium-high heat, combine 2 tablespoons of sugar, the juice of half a lemon, a teaspoon of lemon zest, and 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. Next, add 1 cup of blackberries and let simmer for 2 minutes. Set the syrup aside to cool slightly and allow it to continue to thicken. Okay, I'm just doing some right over.
And you can do this with any fruit. We decided to do blackberries, but raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, whatever you have on hand will work.
And you see how they stay nice and plump, which is just what you want.
It smells so good in here.
So good.
Oh my goodness.
There you have it. So now for our panini. I'm going to start by making what makes this panini special, and that is a homemade pesto. So I'm starting with some pine nuts, and I'm just going to roughly chop them. And I'm using a blender to make the pesto, and if you give it a rough chop right before, it'll just make it easier on your blender. Okay, so this goes right in here. I'll just scoop it up with my hands. And pine nuts are a great classic pesto flavor, but if you want to use walnuts, that's another good nut to use. Okay, and also to our blender, I'm going to add the next staple of a pesto, and that's basil. So I already chopped about 1.5 cups of fresh basil. right into our blender. And then we have Parmesan cheese, and this is another great classic pesto recipe, but if you want to switch things up and do like another kind of hard cheese, go for it. Okay, and then I'm going to stream in olive oil once this starts to blend, but I want to help my blender out just a tiny bit first because there's a lot going at the bottom. Okay, so then just pulse it up. Okay, and pesto is actually a great thing to keep in your fridge, especially in college, because it's an easy like pasta sauce, or you can put it on a sandwich like this. Okay, and so I have this really nice consistency, and I like to keep it a little bit thick because you can see all the specks of the basil and the pine nuts. Okay, so now we're going to start layering our panini, and I have some hearty focaccia bread. You can use whatever kind you like, but I like this because it already has herbs right on top. And just give it a nice spread. Since this is kind of the star of this lunch, I like to add a good amount of the pesto. It smells so good. Okay, and the next thing we're going to layer is some tomato slices. I'm just going to do 1 or 2 slices. Okay, I'm just going to put them right on top. And then I also have some chicken and some mozzarella cheese. And when the cheese melts on the panini press, there is nothing better. Just layer it right on top. And don't worry about it being too thick. The panini presser really does smush it down. And then last thing before we put it onto our press is I like to brush it with olive oil. This will give whatever kind of bread you use a nice crust, but it'll also make sure it doesn't stick. So just a little bit, and we'll do it on both sides. All right, and so my panini maker is nice and hot, very hot, and I am just going to grill it for about 1 to 2 minutes and check it depending on how hot your panini press gets. Okay, so I can hear it sizzling, and I think it is done. Wow, you can see the grill marks. Look great. How good does that cheese oozing out look? Your roommates will definitely come in the kitchen when they smell this. I'm just gonna cut it. And here is our panini. It's thick, it's hearty, and this will keep you going through the winter for sure.
We're finishing off today with a decadent dessert, and what's more warm and comforting than a molten lava cake? In this bowl, I've already melted 10 tablespoons of butter with 8 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. And it's important that when you do melt this, if you're using a microwave like I did, that you do it in intervals, because if you do it all at once, you run the risk of burning your chocolate. So to this mixture, we're going to go ahead and add 1½ cups of powdered sugar. Dust that right in there. Perfect. And now we're going to add a ½ cup of flour. It's important when you're baking that you have exact measurements. Baking's kind of like a science, which is probably why I love it so much. Get that right in there. And we're going to whisk together these ingredients rather than stirring them because you don't want to have any lumps in this. You want a nice, smooth chocolate cake. You can smell the richness of the chocolate. And that's what I love about using bittersweet as opposed to a milk chocolate, is that it doesn't taste too sugary, especially when you're adding all of this powdered sugar. It just adds a bunch of flavors. All right, that's looking nice and thick. So now we're going to go ahead and add our eggs. We're adding 3 eggs and 3 egg yolks. We're adding the extra egg yolks because they add an extra rich element. And when you have something like a molten lava cake, it's important to keep it as rich as possible. Get those in there. Here's our egg yolks. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna whisk this all together. Once your batter is smooth and combined, we're going to finish it off with my two favorite ingredients in this recipe. The first one is vanilla extract. It's my favorite ingredient in anything, but it works especially nice in here because it adds a warm note that balances out the chocolate. We're going to add 1.5 teaspoons. Perfect. Oh, I love the smell of it. It's like perfume. And the next thing is espresso powder. Don't be alarmed if you don't like coffee. It's totally fine. Espresso powder isn't going to add a coffee flavor to this. It actually plays a part in enhancing the chocolate flavor. Chocolate and coffee pair wonderful together and just balance each other out rather than overpowering one another. Perfect. Now that that's all combined, we're going to go ahead and add this into our ramekins. I have here 4 already greased ramekins that I actually dusted with flour too. You don't have to dust them with flour, but this really helps in making sure that your lava cakes don't stick. Because they have a short baking time and stay so gooey, it's important that they don't stick or else you'll end up with a mess everywhere. Actually, the first time that I decided to make molten lava cakes, it was kind of a disaster. I took them out of the oven a little bit too soon and was so excited by how they smelled when they came out that I immediately flipped them over and it was just chocolate batter that rolled everywhere. So you really need to be patient even though they taste so good. And now we're going to pop these into the oven at 425 for about 15 minutes. And now it's time to plate them. This is my favorite part. When you see the chocolate ooze out, you'll understand why. An easy tip before you flip it over is to take a knife and just run it around the edges, just like this. And that way you can ensure that your cake won't stick to the ramekin and will come out with ease. But be careful. You want to work quickly, but the ramekins will be hot. And we're going to go ahead and just flip it right over onto the plate. One thing I like to do that helps make it a little bit easier is if you actually put the plate onto the ramekin and then flip the whole thing over so you can get it right in the center like that. Just wiggle that in. We're going to pull that right off. Beautiful. Now there's a few different ways that you can plate this. One way is by drizzling some white chocolate right on top. Amazing. One more thing we can do, if we'd want, I'm going to run our edge around this one as well. Instead of white chocolate, if you already feel like the chocolate's too sweet, is I have some powdered sugar here as well. I'm going to flip this right over. Perfect. And just give it a nice dusting. There we go. All right, this is the best part. We're going to dive in and just pull it apart just like that. That is beautiful. All the chocolate oozes right out and combines with the powdered sugar. This is definitely the best. Thank you for joining us in making our favorite winter comfort foods.
You can find all these recipes and behind-the-scenes footage on our Facebook page or visit VanderbiltTelevision.com, and we hope to see you next time.